Hi there and welcome to Wassell Woodworking. On today's episode we are going to be making this cutting board. I'll call it the Zig Zag board. And it's made of a couple different woods. You have cherry, maple, and walnut, which are three traditionally tightly closed grain woods that are good for making cutting boards. The other feature of this is it actually has a chamfer on the bottom edge to make it easier if you're using it for cheese to get your hands underneath it and lift up. When they're square, it makes it very difficult, so that's a good way to have a handhold on any side. I'm going to glue this up using boards that are, I'm going to cut 3 boards. Each one is going to be 40 inches long. It's going to be 1 inch wide, and then I'll cut them into strips on a 45-degree angle at about 1.5 inches wide. And then I'll take those and glue them all together. So let's see how this is done.
Now it's off to the joiner. I'm going to start by taking the piece of maple and running it through to get one nice straight edge, and then that'll be used on the table saw to cut into the strips. And now I'm taking the piece of cherry, and the reality is I had to run this through about 4 or 5 times to get it nice and straight on one edge. And then lastly is a nice big wide piece of Brazilian walnut, which I run through. And it's a little harder, so it takes a little longer, a little more effort to get that to go through. Now we're back off to the table saw. We're going to take that piece of cherry and cut a 1 inch wide strip. We're going to do this twice, and each of these are going to be cut in halves, but I only need 3 of those 4. Now I'm going to take the piece of maple, we're going to run it through, doing the same thing, 2 strips and cutting each of them in half that you'll see in a minute. And then lastly, the beautiful Brazilian walnut, we're going to cut a piece 3/4 of an inch wide because it's already 1 inch thick. Now we're at my Delta planer. It's a 12-inch planer, and we're going to take these down where they're all about the same size. In this case, I'm after about a 3/4 by 3/4 inch board, and I'm going to put them through many times. You can see at first some of the boards aren't being held by the rollers, so I have to help those through. And before you know it, I'll have really done each side at least once or twice, and back and forth until all of the boards are identical, which is very important for this geometric cutting board. The table saw, I take each of the walnut pieces and cut them in half. That gives me 4 pieces. I only need 3 of these, so I'll take the worst one and discard it. I'll repeat the same with the cherry and same with the walnut. Now I'm going to arrange them to see how I'm going to make that board that I'm going to use to cut it at 45 degrees. And I offset the ends so that I don't have to waste the triangle that would be left if you cut them at a 45-degree angle. And this saves a lot of wood. So taking all that wood and holding it in the clamps, I put the polyethylene glue on, and now I'm arranging them. And what you can't see is I have a line drawn to make sure that they're all lined properly at that 45-degree angle. Then I take a host of clamps and clamp it all up really well to let the polyurethane glue dry properly. Once completed and run through the planer, which I didn't show you unfortunately, I take it back to the table saw and put it in front of the miter gauge at a 45-degree angle and cut the edge. And now you can see why I put those at that angle, because it really saved a lot of wood there. I would have cut off a big triangle otherwise. And then I run and repeat and repeat and repeat over and over until the piece gets so small that I now have to end up running it against the fence using a push block to get the pieces all finished. Here we show what the pieces look like when I put them all together. And one of the things I decided to do is rearrange them a little bit, but that inspiration didn't hit me till a little bit later on. So for right now, I'm pretty excited, thinking it'll look very similar to the old cutting board. And now it's time to glue the pieces up again. So using the clamp to hold it, I put the polyurethane glue on it, using Gorilla Glue in this case, spurting out with a hotel key card. And that does a great job of ensuring that everything's coated properly. Then I'll start taking them and arranging them, being very careful to make sure that all the intersections of the wood line up with the intersections on the next piece so that the geometric pattern looks well. And one of the last things I do as I'm clamping it up is I will double check and then take a hammer and make sure that they're all flush with one another.
So the clamps have all been removed, and I've scraped off as much of the polyurethane glue as possible on both sides. So now it's time to square it up and run it through the planer to see I can finish it up. Now the issue is the grain is at 45 degrees. No matter how you run this through the planer, it should be able to go through okay, although I think I'll go with the way of the arrows. So I gotta get it narrow enough to where it'll fit through the 12-inch planer, and then I'll sand it down and then cut the sides.
Now over at the table saw, I use my table saw sled, which I made in an earlier episode, and I run that through. I'm using that because the cutting board's kind of large and it doesn't hold well with my miter gauge on the table saw. And this is a little bit safer as well. And then I'll take that over to the planer and start running it through the planer over and over, taking just as little off as possible to remain as thick as possible. And then lastly, I'm going to take it over to the table saw. I'm going to cut a 45-degree chamfer on each of the 4 sides, and that will make it easy to pick up when you're using this in the kitchen.
I'm using Wassell oil, Danish oil finish. This is great for cutting boards and won't cause an issue. It's not harmful if you ingest it once it's cured. So I'm going to use this on this cutting board as well as one I did a year or so ago. So I'm going to start by putting gloves on because this stuff is just easier to get off. I'll also say, it's a warning, and it probably says on here the danger, this stuff can spontaneously combust. Alright, so you can do it a couple different ways. One easy way is just to pour it on, and it'll really bring out the beautiful color in the wood, as you can see right here. And you want to fully saturate it and let it soak into those pores. What's going to happen is this is going to cure deep inside the wood in the pores, and it'll protect it from water and other things. Speaking of which, you never want to take a cutting board like this and soak it in water in the sink for cleaning or anything like that. You want to get it wet, and then once it's wet, oops, that was more than one. Then once it's wet, you want to dry it off immediately, at least the excess water, so that the wood doesn't have a chance to swell, because that'll cause a big problem. Alright, so it's been 24 hours since I finished this project. The oil is starting to cure. I can touch it without getting anything on me, but I will let it sit for a few more days before I use it. I'm very happy with the way it turned out, so if you like this video, subscribe today by clicking below. Also, put your comments below and give it a thumbs up, and pass the video along to someone else. Show them how to make this really nice cutting board. So the biggest question I have now is, who am I going to give this to for Christmas? Guess we'll have to see and find out. Thanks for joining me today on Wassell Woodworking.